Well, folks, welcome to another edition of Egberto Off the Record on Politics, or rather, Egberto Off the Record on Substack, live via, of course, Politics Done Right. I'm honored to have Walter Rhein today. I saw him in a Substack live with another Substacker, and I was really intrigued by not only the subject, but by the quality of the discussion, something that I think we need a lot here more at Substack. That is how we differentiate ourselves from mainstream media. This is how we differentiate ourselves from the noise on social media. This is a serious platform for actually everybody, and specifically people who want to have serious conversations. So without further ado, Senor Walter, how are you doing this morning, my friend?
Oh, wonderful. We got a nice sunny day and it feels like spring and it feels like life is going to continue. So I got to hold on to that feeling. And I really appreciate this opportunity to chat with you today.
Well, you know what? This morning on my KPFT morning show on KPFT FM 90.1, a Nigerian young lady who's also a Substacker called into the show, and she made the most prescient statement. And she said, you know, Egberto, when I came to America, my parents told me this was a land of opportunity and that you can be whatever you wanted to be. That is the dream that this Nigerian family had as they moved to America. And I can tell you, as a Panamanian, when I came here, I remember my grandfather was here in the States at first. He got here first. And when he came home to visit one time, and I was a kid, I picked up his shoes and I said, imagine these shoes walked in New York City. That is a reverence with which we had about America, and all of us that are from a foreign land coming over here. Yeah. That is a purity of the thought that we had. Now, you've told me that you are married to a Peruvian, another person from another place who came over here, the land of opportunity, etc. I want to start our discussion because what I titled the discussion is the state of our immigration and its implication. And then at the end, I want to talk a little bit about what we're calling, are we gentrifying Substack? But let's start here with immigration and what many of the people coming over here legally and otherwise think about America and the what about America. Your thoughts?
Oh, and it's like you said, and it's super heartbreaking because you see so many people that come here with all those hopes and then they have those hopes crushed, by things that are just kind of inherent injustices that Americans refuse to recognize. And it's just this idea of American exceptionalism. I mean, that's a beautiful story. It's great to think of yourself that way, but sometimes that thought makes you overlook the flaws that there are. And I think we're doing ourselves a disservice by just not saying, just like any other place. That doesn't mean you have hard will against something, but you're just saying, look, we have these problems we have to fix. Let's recognize these problems. The solution isn't to pretend we're already perfect. And I think that's just something that the mythology of the United States of America, remains a young nation, and you're growing into your adolescence. And it'd be nice to grow into our mature middle age when we start, as our cultural identity. And there's no reason for there to be hardship here. There's so much money here. And and it's just the way we're at each other, especially now when grievance has become so much of the political dialogue. And the real unfortunate thing is how immigrants have become, and this has just happened. Well, it's always been the case. Immigrants have always borne the brunt. But over the last 10 years, they're being targeted unfairly by, politicians who are of nefarious purpose. And it's frustrating how you don't get a chance to combat these narratives that are just untrue. I've talked to people and said, they're like, well, when you say immigrant, what do you think? And I'm like, do you think a person with a PhD, And it's like, why? And then people are shocked. I'm like, a lot of immigrants who are come here have tremendous levels of education. They understand multiple languages. They bring a diversity of culture. They understand all these things that are useful to us that we need. And that is never in the dialogue about immigration. It's always presented in the form of crisis, which is completely false because, we never talk about how much immigrants contribute to our economy and how our economy will collapse without the immigrants. And I think we're going to learn it the hard way that that's the case because of all these atrocities that are going on right now, these unfortunate things. And I hope America wakes up soon and embraces, the reality of the promise that has been unfulfilled until now.
No, Walter, I like to do this not in the beginning. I like to do this in the middle after people have had a flavor to hear your thought process. Tell me a little bit about yourself. Why did you, what gave you this insight that too many Americans fail to have?
And that's something I work on a lot. I grew up in a very small, rural area, a very conservative rural place. And when you look at the heat maps of the United States, you always see we give disproportionate electoral power to these rural areas that kind of celebrate anti-intellectualism. So I lived through that. And it's one of those things where we just disregard the racial history of the United States and the crimes that have been committed by our country. All that is disregarded, but you can't hide it. It leaves an empty space, right? And so as an inquisitive kid growing up in a space like that, I had this just sense. You get the sense that something is not quite right, or you're not being told a complete story. And eventually, I struggled even in college. And eventually, when I graduated college, I just I got to get out of here. So I just sold everything I had. And it was kind of a point of desperation where I wasn't fitting in and I was sensing something wasn't right. And I didn't really understand. This kind of, I talk about with Will Fullwood, that kind of racial awakening that I think all Americans need to have because of all these things that we've been told. We see the contradictions, we see the contradictions. We don't know what the real story is. I lived in Peru then for 10 years, and it was interesting to live in a country that hasn't had, the idea of supremacy so infused with the cultural ideology, and that was eye-opening to me. And a lot of my expectations about what was human nature were replaced by, oh, this is American versus this is the rest of the world. You get a better understanding of what human nature is. So then I got married eventually in Peru. My wife and I, we saw the benefit because you can't really get anywhere in the world with your Peruvian passport. So I'm like, well, let's get you your U.S. citizenship. And at that time, Obama had been sworn in. So we thought, okay, maybe things are on the uprise in the United States. But even flying back, it's just like now it's been over the last 15 years seeing how immigrants are treated directly through the experience of my wife. And it's always embarrassing, because all these injustices are always out there. It's easy to turn a blind eye if it's not happening directly to you. And so I'm as guilty of that as anybody. And but I see the problem now. It affects my family. And so I've over the last 4 or 5 years as I've been building my platform, I'm an advocate for, just what should be just basic human rights and human dignity.
That is so important. Now, you talk a little bit about your wife coming over here. It was during the Obama time. You didn't have a problem with paperwork and all of that during that time, right?
Well, that process is complex anyway, and it's really stressful. But I've been through it. I think the immigration process changes from year to year. Yeah. We had an advantage because I had been living in Peru for years. If you're in the United States and you bring over your bride, but you didn't get married over there, or if you're filing for it in the United States versus if you're filing for it in a foreign nation, the process is a little bit more streamlined if you've actually can demonstrate you've actually been in the presence of this person you've married. So we got through that, but it takes a couple of years. It's been a little bit in the past now, but there's a lot of stresses with that going in. And I had to drill her on the citizenship test. I have some funny stories about that because I made up all the flashcards, and I'm just like, we're going through this. We're going through all these 100 questions again and again. And she's just, why so much? I'm like, because it's going to be stressful when you go in there. And I want you to be able to spit out these answers without even having to think of it. They just are instantly there. We're going to, go around the process of me having to recall it. And it's just like going to jump into your forefront of your mind. And she did. She sat down, did all the, and it's expensive. And it's like, if you get the questions wrong on the citizenship test, you're done and you're out that money for applying. And so, that's just constant stresses. But it was something, I shouldn't minimize it. It's a tough process then. And I'm sure it's a even more difficult process today.
It is amazing how difficult it is, the citizenship. And it's amazing that those that are coming in to be citizens generally have to know more about the country than many born Americans actually know about the country. And sometimes that becomes upsetting to, as a radio host as well, it becomes upsetting to many of the, generally it would be a lot of our MAGA callers who like to wrap themselves in the flag. And the worst thing that happens is when they call into a show that is hosted by an immigrant, and this immigrant happens to know the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and why things should work the way they do. And that is a sort of thing that I think in this country puts a lot of fear into people. because in our high schools and high schools and elementary schools, we've given up on really teaching physics and civics and knowing your country and the value of work, all these things that it's not taught here in American schools anymore, that we have to get as immigrants coming into the country. And it kind of creates a chasm where it creates animosities among people, as opposed to bringing people together as, well, if this person coming into the country wants to learn so much about this country, then wow, it is something that we should revere. Now, one of the things that concerns me, though, and this now is on the practical, this isn't on the emotional or anything like that. We just don't have the right birth rate to sustain ourselves going forward. We just don't have the right workers who are willing to go into the fields and produce. We just don't have it here. If I live in a very red district, a very red portion of Houston, Texas, which is sort of one of the few blue islands in Texas. And it's amazing how I find many of these people to be anti-immigrant, but all the foods that they eat are immigrant based. All the work done in their homes are immigrant based. All the yard support, etc., are immigrant based, and they want these people gone. What do they think is going to happen if these people actually leave?
And that's it. They're not thinking, and it's just so easy these days. And I think what we've seen is just people haven't. I mean, social media culture is a radical change in the internet is a radical change in human evolution. And we are. I mean, this technology has been over the last 100 years advancing so fast. And it's outpaced what, it used to be science fiction writers would come up with these things and say, these are the potential problems. Technology is faster than the science fiction writers now can predict the problems. And so I think we've just been caught with our pants down about the impact that social media can have, the power of it. And they're presenting people with false information. People get most of their information through memes, and it feels good to get furious about something. And and if you try to stop it, they're like, oh, you're no fun at parties, is what they say, because you're like, let's talk about the actual reality of what you're saying. These things all fall apart for this and this reason. They're like, and people get kind of resentful. They're like, why are you disrupting my right to kind of just flow off? And it's like, because what you're thinking now is going to hurt people. And what's always been in the case in the United States is that discrepancy between our stated purpose and our stated laws, the things we actually recognize. But then there's that unspoken thing, and that's the racism and the hatred and all the other things that are there. And so coming here like my wife did, or like you did as an immigrant, you're only presented with the stuff that we recognize. But then when you talk to people that have lived here, they know that unspoken thing. And they're like, you're going to find out, because even though you're supposed to have these protections and whatever, those things are actually only reserved for certain groups. And I think that's coming into play with a lot of the discussions that are going on now.
It's amazing because, right now there's sort of a war on reading, a war on books, a war on critical thinking in the country and one of the things that I've always said is that one of the reasons why the right is so concerned about the freedom to learn is that as people learn about real history and not the sanitized history that they get in high school, they start to ask important questions. I did an exercise on one of my shows one time. I think it was on the morning show, and I said, we are always concerned about Iran getting a bomb and blowing stuff up, Afghanistan, or North Korea getting a bomb and blowing up stuff. We're always concerned about some country in Africa who has a human rights problem. We are always concerned about some country that is polluting XYZ, right? We are always concerned about that. And because we don't promote critical thinking here in the United States, we forget that for everything that we have accused others of, we have done or are currently doing. The only country that has ever used an atomic bomb on human beings, that's us. The only country effected a true genocide on a large population, the indigenous, was us. The only country that has effected a true chattel type slavery, it's us. And for all of that, we call ourselves exceptional. And that's why sometimes when we have elected somebody like a Donald Trump, it isn't really, while a lot of us look at it as being something strange, it may not be all that out of the norm.
Absolutely. And that supremacy mindset is doomed to collapse. And it's exactly fits into this, because if you examine it, it instantly, you see the contradictions. And that's kind of what I grew up with. I'm just like, this isn't right, but when you're a young person, you're coming into your own strength as an individual. You don't necessarily have the power to question. So it just makes you frustrated. And then they capitalize on that frustration. So I think we have a lot of potential people that could be allies in this fight for, greater, prosperity for all. They're captured instead because the frustration is part of this inherently corrupt system. But when I sat down and started to read Reconstruction in Black America by W.B. Du Bois, it's just like instantly, it's like click, click, click. It's like all these frustrations that I used to have, all these things that didn't make sense. Oh, there it is. It's all laid right out. And when you look at, like the injustices and the civil rights movement and how the Jim Crow era inspired the Nazis, the Nuremberg laws were based on Jim Crow laws, but even the Nazis said, we're not going to be that extreme. He's like, the Americans are too extreme. And once you start seeing all these things and you see, it's like, oh, this is the thing that they've been trying to hide. But this is why they're so desperate, because it's that one little key. And if you manage to convey it, and we've got the power too right now, once you convey it, it clicks in people's mind, not in everybody, not the first time, but they see it's like, well, here's the actual answer of things that make sense. It's like that moment, it's like the Matrix. Like people are like, okay, now I see. And it's almost astonishing how effective they've been at hiding it. I mean, the task, what they've done to normalize the system of oppression that we have, it shouldn't be possible. And intelligent people should be able to break through. But that's our job. We're going to keep working on it.
Willful ignorance is a thing. I mean, sometimes willful ignorance is actually a protection mechanism for, oh my God, you mean this is what we did? Oh my, as opposed to saying we did wrong and we atone for it. I used and I spoke about this morning on my show, and that is I came from Panama, a Latin American country. We also have these severe prejudices, in effect, like we are fairly more so likely than a lot of Americans homophobic. We're also fairly sexist. And I had to extricate all of that out of myself here in the United States. And I can say with pride that, yes, I'm not looking for a pat on the back, but yes, I did extricate those bad values, those bad things. You have to reach a point as a society to do that. And that, I think when we do that, the immigration issues and all these type of things will go away, because we no longer have to have the false pretenses of who we are, but just one specific thing. And that is, we are simply human beings with flaws.
And that stuff is indoctrinated into you through tradition, through all these things. Like, they don't deliberately say we're going to make you homophobic or we're going to make you racist.
Right.
But that's that unspoken thing again, because outwardly they say we're against those things, but then that secret second tier, that unspoken rule, they are finding out ways. Like the third verse of the national anthem is blatantly, and so things like that. So we're kind of coerced into being. I mean, the KKK got that installed. That was by executive order in like 1917, I think was the year. And they were just chortling to themselves, because now every time when we stand respectfully for the flag, they've made that into sort of our conditioning process for white supremacy to tolerate it. And there's a lot of things like that. It's just everywhere. One by one, we got to find them and dismantle them. Not one is too small to get our attention.
That is so true. Well, I want to change the subject, but is there anything else that you want to close out this section with on immigration?
No, it's wonderful. And I appreciate and love all our immigrants and welcome them. And we're doing our best to stand up and speak for them. And I hope they speak more too. We need them.
And I think you mentioned something. I think it's a good thing that we have a platform like this where we can have a measured conversation without the screaming, without all the crazies, if you will. The other subject that I really, really wanted to discuss is what I'm starting to see on Substack, and I want to know your thoughts about it. A lot of other folks have been discussing this, and what I call, actually, it's not my words. There is one of the listeners to my 3:00 program on Substack called it the gentrification of Substack. Whereas we have a lot, as the mainstream media has shrunk, and as they have laid off, or I should say, given golden parachutes to those who they no longer want because maybe they are too harsh on the president, etc. As they leave, a lot of them have made homes here on Substack. And in the process, what we found is that they've garnered a lot of yes, they brought their following, but it seemed to me like, we are sort of a starstruck country. And it seems like immediately a whole lot of folks that's been sitting here for a while have gravitated towards huge support for these stars, if you will. Again, welcome aboard all the new stars. But again, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, first I want to just say quick, I've been reading these comments too. Thanks everybody for your wonderful comments. I'm trying to keep it, and I appreciate all the people that are leaving thoughtful notes and the praise. I like that too. But I think one thing we have to, anytime I've been writing for a long time, and like I said, I was telling you before, platforms always seem to kind of go through this churning thing. I think I've been kind of looking at it as, we're going to enter a global recession here, right? So in terms of what I'm looking at, my little thing, I've seen it kind of, the subscribers have kind of, the rate has kind of dropped down a little bit. But I mean, everybody's terrified right now. Retirement portfolios are crashing. So I wonder if that's the cause of it more so than the influx of the celebrity type writers to Substack. I guess we'll kind of see. I mean, one of the things we have to remember as writers too is we have a certain obligation to maintain the health and well-being of the platforms, and it's kind of easy. I mean, I've seen this on Medium too, where my earnings go down and then they'll come back up. And a lot of it is just because writing is this inherently revenue insecure profession. So that happens. So I try to be mindful not to be thinking that the platform is doing something wrong. I mean, the platform is trying to survive. And if the platform can't make money, we're out of luck anyway, right? So we have a certain obligation to look at the platform. I think what I would like to see, though, is, I mean, they might be missing the mark a little bit because Substack, I feel, has been growing because people are fed up with the mainstream same seven. We always hear the same stories from the same seven commentators. I think people are tired of hearing that. They're seeing it doesn't work. What I would like to see, though, is like I'm not a person who is making Substack's not paying me. All that I make on Substack comes from my generous subscribers and supporters. Yeah. And but I would like to see some of these, if there's people on Substack that are making $500,000 a year with their Substack, they could take it upon themselves to support smaller writers like you and me. I mean, we're kind of trying to move towards this new global order, right? Where we don't have like one or two guys who are oligarchs. We have everybody gets their share. And so, I mean, the people that are doing really well on Substack, maybe we could start a movement for that. You guys, if you're making that much, go ahead and support some of the smaller Substacks, and we'll appreciate you, to the end of the world.
Let me tell you the other thing though, because every single donor to one of the network stars, if you will, comes from our community. Our community are the ones doing it. So one of the things, and I was speaking to another Substacker about this, and I said, maybe, how should I say this? I hear you about the ones that are making $500,000 in revenue from Substack, let's say from the contributors. We don't even come 5% of that.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I think more so than them supporting us, the flagship writers supporting us, and tell me if you can agree with this. I would like our audience, because they're here for a reason. You are more than a reporter. You're an expert that have lived in other countries, and you can give a point of view, etc., that many of the reporters that read the news can't. As a political activist all my life, as an engineer, as a person who studied economics, etc., there are certain things that I have to bring, you have to bring, that even some of the star reporters that are here don't. I know if you take a look at what I do, I will take a lot of the materials that they put out there and add value, add another narrative to it as well, that either they choose not to go into or otherwise. So we provide a different dimension, a different direction. I would hope that we could find a way to address our audience at large, because they're the one funding us, and they're the ones also funding the stars.
Yeah.
I would like for the audience to think, what makes the star a star? What value are they bringing me compared to what value Walter Rhein is bringing me? And I think if we turned it into a meritocracy, then the monies that people bring to support those that they admire or they enjoy reading would pan out appropriately. But what I don't, and tell me if you agree with this, right now with the stars coming, I don't think it's a meritocracy because, again, folks are making because of a name with a major corporation.
Yeah. I've got to say, a couple of these comments are great. Robin Wilding she just mentioned how they don't even have to become paid subscribers. The shares help so much. Like if one of the really big superstars puts a link to our story in their thing, that helps. And it doesn't even have to be a financial burden on them. But yeah, I think though, it's like I said, any business, I mean, there's the business side of things, and then there's the writing side of things and what we hope to achieve. And I expect that Substack will be getting external pressure too, because this idea of controlling the narrative has been something that has infected. Since the beginning of writing, that's a problem. You go back to the first poem, and there's a hidden meaning in there that's a criticism of the regime, even though it seems like it's a poem about flowers. So every writer, we've always had to do that. Yeah, I think the more we just talk about things like this and we encourage people to just be discerning, it's like, yeah, there's great writers that are contributing tremendous things. But if that writer has already, got such a huge following, your subscription doesn't make as big an impact to them as it would to somebody like you or me, who is one of these smaller creators who's kind of still getting established. But I try to do it already, where I interview a lot of different writers who are, up and comers on Substack, and you're doing that too. And it's just as we continue to have this attitude of generosity, I think it'll become infectious. As long as we keep kind of talking about those things, they'll happen on their own. But I mean, you're always going to be flirting with and I think there is a potential benefit to the bigger celebrities bringing in people that wouldn't have been on Substack otherwise. So I think what we're looking at right now, I'm more worried about the global recession. And first of all, that's a problem. Second of all, Substack's got to do what it can to be sustainable. And the third part is then we try to, implement our changes to society as a whole.
No, I agree. And by the way, there's one thing I want to add. There are two things actually, because Robin says, or is it Robin? Somebody in the chat says, but what is meritocracy with regards to writing, right? And I think that's a very important statement there. And here's what I think. I'll give an example. Let me give a personal example. I did a story on Obamacare a few years ago, and it was to a MAGA person. I have both a MAGA and straight audience, so I'm happy for that. And what happened is this woman who hated Obamacare, she just went berserk, and then she told me a story about her disabled son. And after telling me that story, I was able to figure out, hey, your disabled son qualified for Obamacare, and I wrote an article about it, etc. And voila, this woman's life, because she was informed of something she quite didn't know, and we spent the time to do that, suddenly she got insurance, and I imagine a whole lot of other folks who wouldn't have known that, but because of her would have then said, oh my God, this actually supports us. That kind of reporting does provide added value. So to our friend who asked, what is meritorious? If you just talk about something that is simply clickbait,
Oh, yeah. But the other thing, too, is because people are, and it's what I was talking about before, we all have that general sense something's not right. We're not being told the whole truth about things. Mm-hmm. And, they'll try to censor things, and it's ongoing right now where they're erasing. It's just deplorable what's going on. They're erasing the contributions of Black servicemen and women and all the people throughout history they don't want to even recognize exist. Well, even if you erase all those things, it leaves us empty space. There's a negative space. And people are inquisitive, and they'll look at that. They'll look at the history they present us with and trying to claim there was always these white superstars that did everything. And inquisitive people are going to say, well, what about this part? And what about this part? And they're going to recognize those try to pull something over on your children, and your children are like, wait a minute, Daddy. Yeah. They know. And it's just, that's human beings. So that's why the supremacy ideology is going to fail. It always has failed in the past because human beings are too smart, and it can inflict a lot of pain on us. It can make our whole society collapse and cause wars, but it's going to fail in the long run. It always has. And I think, we see that when it comes to merit. Sometimes you read things, there's, the Bob Dylan song where he says, every line rang true. Sometimes, and you sense it's true. You sense it's true, and that's merit. Because this is the thing I've been looking for, and it's because that creepy feeling goes away. The rest of the time, when you're being lied to, when you're in an abusive relationship, you know it. And even if you stay and you listen to the lies, something's not right. In another case, you can turn and you can find the person who speaks truth, and you're comforted in your soul. So that's merit to me.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. Now, I also agree with you that if the platform is solid, meaning if the leaders of the platform do what's necessary to make sure the platform can remain, that is what we need to do. And that's one of the reasons why I had another conversation of this with another Substacker. And what I said is, none of this is on either the stars that are coming or the leaders of the platform. It's on the community. And one of the things that I think these types of conversations would do is to sort of make the community aware that this entire ecosystem is meritorious of support and should be regarded and it's best if it's regarded that way.
Yeah. And I think if we just let people know, I mean, if we just make that a thing, it's just remind people that your sponsorship means a lot more to an up-and-coming Substacker than it does to an established superstar who's probably already sitting on a $30 million portfolio. You know, why?
Or two.
Yeah. That's like, why give extra money? It's like, that's what we're fighting against, everybody. We gotta help the people that are on our side because they're struggling just like the rest of us. They're the only ones that are going to understand you and tell you the truth.
Excellent. Well, look, I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down here and have this chat. I think these were two important subjects that I wanted to touch on because I enjoyed I enjoyed the level of your intellect on a couple of other other stacks that I saw you on. So give me a closure so we can kind of close this baby down.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate you and the work that you're doing. I've seen your stuff, and I always like the immigrant story. It's always fascinating. Thanks, Robin. I appreciate it. Robin says she really likes your voice, just the sound of your voice.
Thank you, Robin. I appreciate that.
Good. So yeah, let's keep going onwards and upwards, and we're doing good things. We're creating networks, and I always feel better having these talks and reaching out to people. So thank you.
Well, look, it's been my honor to have this conversation with you. Thank you so kindly. And folks that are listening, we are extraordinarily appreciative of having you here, both for your comments and also just for being here. Thank you so kindly. Have a good one, guys.
Thank you.
We spend a lot of time deconstructing the news, trying to parse it into a form that everybody can understand. We try to find those little nitpicks where it flies above the fray, etc. If you really like these videos that we do, I want to ask a big favor. Please go ahead. Number one, subscribe to our channel. And number two, please join if you can. Thank you so kindly for watching. Keep watching. Please remember to share. We must populate the entire internet with our progressive message, a message that we know is what most Americans say that they want. So help us, please join.